The red rain tree had never spared a traitor. That was why the dragon court dragged Liora Marrow beneath its black branches, with her wrists tied in root chain and a strip of red cloth forced between her teeth. They wanted silence first, then blood. The tree grew in the center of the royal courtyard, taller than the palace gates, its bark black as burned bone, and its roots twisting through the stone like sleeping serpents. No leaves grew from it, only fruit. Hundreds of red fruits hung from the branches, each shaped too much like a heart to be beautiful, each one swollen with old judgment. When the guilty stood beneath the tree, the fruit burst over their heads and stained them with betrayal. That was the law. That was the story. And stories were safest when no one dug under the roots. Liora stood in the circle of white ash at the base of the tree while the court watched from crescent balconies above. Her bare feet bled where the stones had cut her. Her dark hair hung loose around her face. A curse mark, shaped like a small red root, burned beneath the skin at her left wrist. She had carried it since childhood. Since the winter, she was found sleeping beside the tree's lowest root with no family name anyone trusted, and no memory except the sound of something small crying underground. The servants called her root-touched. The nobles called her omen blood. The temple called her dangerous. A cursed woman could clean blood from courtyard stones. She could gather fallen fruit before dawn. She could carry dead petals to the ash pits. But she could not ask why the red rain tree never withered, even during famine years. 3 nights ago, Liora had asked. That was her crime. High-root priestess Meritha stood beside the ash circle in robes of crimson wool and black vine thread, her silver hair braided with tiny bone beads. She was not young, but age had not softened her. Her face held the calm of someone who had mistaken power for holiness for so long that even her cruelty looked ceremonial. "Liora Marrow," Meritha said, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "Cursed attendant of the Red Rain grounds, accused of listening beneath royal roots, stealing temple ash, and feeding treason to the throne." A murmur passed through the court. Feeding treason. The phrase made Liora's stomach twist. She had fed nothing. She had only pressed her ear to the stone after midnight, because she heard a child whispering below the tree. Not one child. Many. She tried to speak through the red cloth, but the root chain around her wrists tightened until pain flashed up her arms. The chain was alive. Its thorns dug just deep enough to remind her that the tree had already been given permission to taste her. On the black throne at the edge of the courtyard sat Dragon King Vaelor Draven. He wore no ceremonial smile, no easy mercy. He sat still in dark scale armor, broad-shouldered beneath a cloak lined with winter fur, his black hair unbound around a face too severe for his age. His amber eyes burned with the kind of fire people feared more because it was controlled. Behind him, the shadow of his dragon moved faintly against the stone wall, but it did not fully rise. Liora had seen that before. The king's dragon was sick. No priest said it aloud. No noble dared. But every time Vaelor passed the red rain tree, the dragon shadow behind him thinned, as if the tree drank something from it. Vaelor's gaze moved from Meritha to Liora, not to her curse mark, to the cloth in her mouth. "Remove the gag," he said. Meritha's fingers tightened around her root staff. "Your Majesty." The accused listened beneath the roots. "Her tongue may carry what the tree has not yet judged." "Then let me hear what frightens your temple." The courtyard went quiet. A guard stepped forward and pulled the red cloth from Liora's mouth. Air struck her throat. She did not waste it. "There are children under the tree." The court recoiled. Meritha's eyes sharpened. "There are traitors under the tree." "No," Liora said, voice rough but steady. "There are children." A fruit above her twitched. Just once. Vaelor saw it. So did Meritha. The priestess lifted her staff. "The red rain tree answers blood, not pity. If she lies, the fruit will burst. If she carries no treason, the branches will remain still. Liora looked up. The red fruits hung over her, like 100 waiting hearts. She had cleaned their stains from stone. She had seen what happened when they burst. The blood fruit did not only mark skin, it entered the mouth, the eyes, the breath. It made the condemned confess, until confession became begging, and begging became silence. Vaelor rose from the throne. The movement alone made the balconies hush. He descended 1 step toward the ash circle. His dragon shadow followed, thinner than it should have been, its wings ragged at the edges. When he came near the tree, one of the red fruits pulsed faintly. Liora's curse mark burned. Vaelor stopped. "What did you hear beneath the roots?" he asked. Meritha turned sharply. "Majesty." He did not look at her. "I asked her." Liora swallowed. "Names. What names?" The root chain tightened. Blood slipped from her wrist. The tree's lowest root moved under the stone. Liora clenched her teeth, refusing to kneel, though pain blurred the courtyard. "I heard a boy say he was Prince Karen," she whispered. "I heard a girl say she was never born because the court needed rain that year. I heard another say his heart was planted before his first cry." A sound moved through the court. Not disbelief. Fear. Meritha struck her staff against the stone. "Enough. Let the tree judge." The branches above Liora shivered. One red fruit loosened, then another. The court leaned forward. Liora closed her eyes. She expected impact. Bursting. Heat. The taste of false guilt forced down her throat. Instead, the first fruit stopped inches above her head. It hung in the air, beating. Liora opened her eyes. The fruit pulsed once, then again, like a heart. Across the tree, every red fruit began to beat. Onebiwan, hundreds of them. The courtyard filled with the wet, impossible rhythm of living hearts. Vaelor's face went pale. Meritha whispered, "No." Golden light opened inside the nearest fruit, and from within it came a child's voice. Chiron. Another fruit pulsed. Heir. Another. Thorn. Another. Myelis. The names spread through the branches like rain spoken backward. The roots beneath Liora's feet glowed red gold, and tiny child-shaped shadows moved under the stone, pressing their hands upward from below. The red rain tree did not burst over her. It bowed its branches toward her. Liora's curse mark split open in gold light. The root chain around her wrists snapped. Vaelor looked from the beating fruit to the glowing roots beneath her feet, horror cutting through his royal stillness. Meritha took 1 step back. Too late. The lowest root rose from the stone and curled around Liora's bleeding wrist, not binding her, but recognizing her. A voice came from inside the tree. Not one child. All of them. Heart. Root heir. The courtyard fell silent. Then the tree dropped 1 final fruit at Vaelor's feet. It did not beat. It cracked open. Inside lay a tiny crown made of dried red roots, and wrapped around it was a strip of royal infant cloth, embroidered with the Dragon King's own house mark. The tiny root crown lay at Vaelor's feet. No one breathed. The red fruit had cracked open like a heart split by confession, and inside it, wrapped around the dried root crown, was a strip of royal infant cloth marked with House Draven's black gold dragon. The embroidery was old, faded, too carefully preserved to be accident. Vaelor stared at it. Liora Marrow stood beneath the bowed red rain tree with blood running from her wrists and gold light burning through the split curse mark at her skin. The lowest root still curled around her arm, not tight enough to hurt, but firm enough that every noble could see the tree had recognized her. Heart-Root heir. The words seemed to hang in the courtyard, like smoke no wind could move. High Root Priestess Meritha struck her staff against the stone. "Do not touch it, Your Majesty." Vaelor's eyes lifted slowly. "Why?" It is root bait. The tree has been disturbed by cursed blood. The fruit above them beat harder, hundreds of red hearts, pulsing from black branches. Liora felt the rhythm enter her bones. It was not one heartbeat. It was many. Too many for one tree. Too young, too frightened. Some slow and faint, some quick with panic, some barely there, as if they had been beating in darkness for so long they had forgotten what living air felt like. Vaelor looked at Meritha. The tree named children. The tree names guilt. It named Karen. Meritha's mouth tightened, only slightly, but Liora saw it. So did Vaelor. The king bent and reached toward the cracked fruit. The roots under the stone stirred. Meritha stepped forward. Majesty, royal law forbids the king from touching treason fruit before priestly reading. Vaelor's hand stopped an inch above the infant cloth. His dragon shadow thinned behind him, its ragged wings twitching against the courtyard wall. Liora saw pain move through his face, not loudly, not for pity, but like something had pulled at the fire beneath his ribs. The red rain tree pulsed. A fruit above Vaelor beat in answer. Liora whispered, "It is taking from him." The court turned toward her. Meritha's eyes sharpened. Silence. But Vaelor looked at Liora. "What is?" She swallowed. The root around her wrist warmed, giving strength where fear had taken it. "The tree. Every time you come near it, your dragon shadow fades." A murmur spread over the balconies. No one spoke of the king's sick dragon. Liora had just done it before the entire court. Meritha lifted her staff. "The cursed girl seeks to frighten you away from sacred judgment." Vaelor finally picked up the infant cloth. The moment his fingers touched it, the red root crown unfolded. Not into a crown, into a tiny cradle. The courtyard gasped. The cradle was no longer than Vaelor's hand, woven from dried red roots and lined with something pale as bone. At its center, a single golden heartbeat flickered. Vaelor went still. A child's voice came from the cradle. "Brother." The word struck him harder than a blade. His face emptied. Liora felt the tree shudder through her wrist. The heartbeat inside the cradle pulsed once, and the fruit above them answered. One by one, the beating fruits whispered again, not in a rush this time, but in order. Karen, Heir, Thorn, Mylis, Rovin, Saela, little Arik. At the last name, Vaelor's hand closed around the cradle so tightly, Liora feared it would break. Meritha's face paled beneath her ritual paint. Vaelor turned to her. "Eric was my brother." The court fell into a silence, deeper than fear. Everyone knew the old story of Prince House Draven. He had been born during the famine winter, too weak to breathe, too frail to survive the first night. The temple had held a mourning rite beneath the red rain tree, and 3 months later, the famine ended. The court called it a blessing after grief. The cradle in Vaelor's hand beat again. "Not dead," whispered the child's voice. "Planted." Liora's stomach turned. The roots beneath the ash circle glowed brighter, and the stone under her feet became briefly clear. Beneath the courtyard, under layers of soil and bone-white ash, tiny shadows lay curled among the roots. Not bodies exactly, not ghosts entirely. Children folded into the tree's hunger, their heartbeats threaded through red roots that ran toward the palace, toward the throne. Vaelor saw it too. He staggered one step. The dragon shadow behind him collapsed to one knee. Meritha raised both hands. "This is forbidden root vision. It twists grief into accusation." Liora looked at her. Then why did it know his brother's name? The priestess's gaze cut toward her like a knife. "Because you fed it that name. I did not know it. Cursed blood learns what honest blood should not." Vaelor's voice came low. "Enough." Meritha turned to him. "Majesty." I said enough. The black branches of the red rain tree creaked above them. For the first time, Meritha looked afraid. Not of the king, of the tree. Liora felt the root around her wrist tighten. A warning passed through it. Not words. Pressure. A memory. Trying to open. She saw a chamber beneath the courtyard. Priests in crimson robes. A newborn wrapped in House Draven cloth. A younger Meritha standing beside the tree's first root. Not as high priestess then, but as an acolyte, with tears on her face. An older priest pressed a thorn blade to the child's chest and whispered, "1 royal heart for 10 harvest years." The vision vanished. Liora gasped. Vaelor stepped toward her. "What did you see?" Meritha snapped. "Do not answer." The root chain broken at Liora's feet twitched, trying to rise again. Vaelor saw it. His amber eyes burned. "Do not bind her." Meritha's expression hardened. "If she speaks unfiltered root memory, the court may be infected." Vaelor looked at the infant cradle in his hand, then at the beating fruit above him. "I am beginning to think infection is what your temple calls evidence." A dangerous sound moved through the balconies. Hope, maybe, or panic. The two often sounded alike, before truth became safe. Liora lifted her chin, though the vision had left her shaking. "I saw priests beneath the courtyard. I saw a child in your housecloth. I saw a thorn blade." Meritha's face became still. Too still. Vaelor's voice dropped. "Who held the blade?" Liora looked at the priestess. Meritha smiled faintly. "Careful, cursed girl." The red rain tree answered before Liora could. A red fruit fell from the highest branch. It did not stop above Liora. It dropped into Meritha's hands. The priestess froze. The fruit began to beat violently. Then it split across the center, spilling golden light over her palms. A child's voice whispered from inside it. Meritha held the bowl. The court erupted. Meritha dropped the fruit, as if it had burned her. But the golden light stayed on her hands, staining every line of her palms. Vaelor looked from the stain to her face. "The bowl for what?" Meritha said nothing. The roots beneath the courtyard began moving, slowly, heavily, like something buried, had heard the question and was trying to rise. Liora felt the tree's voice gather behind her ribs. All the children whispered at once. "Ask where our hearts went. Ask where our hearts went." The children's whisper moved through the courtyard, like wind beneath skin. No one laughed. No one called it trickery. Even the nobles who had spent their lives hiding behind ritual and silk looked down at the glowing roots with the naked fear of people realizing the stone under their feet had been listening longer than they had been lying. Liora stood beneath the bowed red rain tree, the root still curled around her wrist like a pulse made visible. Her body shook from the force of the children's voices. They were not inside her exactly. They were under her, around her, threaded through the fruit, the bark, the ash circle, the black veins of root running toward the palace. "Ask where our hearts went." Vaelor held the tiny root cradle in his palm. Inside it, the heartbeat that had called him brother flickered gold. The Dragon King did not look like a man holding a relic. He looked like a man holding a wound that had been dressed as history. His voice was quiet when he spoke to Meritha. Where did their hearts go? The high-root priestess lifted her chin. Golden stain still marked her palms from the fruit that had split in her hands. She folded them inside her crimson sleeves, but too late. Everyone had seen. "The red rain tree preserves what royal weakness would waste," she said. A ripple of horror moved through the balconies. Vaelor's face became very still. "Children are not waste." "Neither is a starving kingdom," Meritha answered, and for the first time her voice sharpened enough to show the fear beneath ceremony. "You sit on a throne kept alive by harvests your ancestors did not deserve. The old famine would have ended House Draven. The first sacrifice saved the realm." "Sacrifice," Liora whispered. The word tasted wrong. Meritha turned to her. "You know nothing of famine, root, child. You know nothing of mothers boiling bark, soldiers eating leather, dragons devouring their own eggs. One royal infant was planted, and rain came. Crops returned. The tree fed the throne, and the throne fed the kingdom. The fruits above them beat harder. Liora felt each heartbeat recoil from Meretha's words. Not pride, not sacred memory, terror. They did not choose it, Liora said. Meretha's eyes flashed. Children do not choose hunger either. Vaelor stepped forward. His dragon shadow rose behind him, thin but furious. Do not make my brother's murder sound like mercy. The word murder struck the courtyard like thunder. Several nobles flinched. Some looked toward the temple guards. Others looked at the palace doors, already measuring which side survival might favor. Meretha saw the shift and changed her weapon. Your Majesty, she said, softer now. You grieve because you have been shown one child's voice. I have carried all their cries for 40 years. Do you think I enjoyed the bowl? Do you think every root priestess woke hungry for royal blood? We preserved your line because kings are allowed to be horrified after others have done the necessary thing. Vaelor's hand tightened around the root cradle. The heartbeat inside flickered weakly. Liora felt pain pass through the tree. He is fading, she said. Vaelor looked at the cradle. Eric? The tree is using him to speak. It costs him. The root around Liora's wrist tightened, not painfully, urgently. A path opened in her mind, down through the ash circle, under the oldest root, toward a chamber where red vessels hung like lanterns filled with pulsing gold. Liora staggered. Vaelor reached toward her, then stopped before touching her. The restraint cut through her fear strangely. He could have seized her and demanded answers. Every king she had known in stories would have. Instead, he asked, What do you see? A chamber beneath the tree, she said, breath uneven. There are vessels, red glass or fruit shells. I think that is where the hearts went. Meretha slammed her root staff against the stone. The ash circle ignited crimson. Roots burst from the ground around Liora, rising like prison bars. Vaelor moved, but the red rain tree reacted first. Its lowest branch swept down between the priestess and the ash circle, shielding Liora with black bark. The court gasped. The tree had never shielded the accused. Meretha's mouth tightened. You are waking what should sleep. No, Liora said, gripping the root around her wrist. I am hearing what never stopped crying. The words were not loud. They did not need to be. The fruit above her answered with 100 heartbeats. Vaelor turned toward the temple guards. Open the root chamber. None of them moved. Meretha smiled faintly. There is no chamber. The tree split the lie. One root tore upward through the courtyard stone, cracking the white ash circle, open from edge to center. Beneath it, a staircase appeared, made not of carved stone, but of intertwined red roots descending into darkness. Warm air rose from below. It smelled of rain, blood, and children's breath. The court recoiled. Vaelor stared into the opening. His dragon shadow bowed its head, not in obedience, but in pain. Meretha raised her staff again. If you descend, you will break the right that feeds your throne. Vaelor looked at her. Then my throne has been eating too long. He stepped toward the root stair. The fruits above shrieked, not in warning, in fear. Liora understood just before the root around her wrist pulled her back. Not you, she said. Vaelor stopped. His amber eyes cut to her. The tree drinks your dragon when you stand too close. If you go first, it may use you the way it used them. A muscle worked in his jaw. Then who? The answer moved through the root around her wrist. Liora looked down into the dark stairway. Her whole life had been spent cleaning the tree's aftermath. Blood-stained stones, split fruit, ash after judgment. She had been called cursed because she heard crying no one else wanted to hear. Now, the crying had become a road. "Me," she said. Meritha laughed softly. "Yes, let the cursed girl enter the root mouth. The tree will close, and your problem will be solved." Vaelor's eyes went cold. "If it closes on her, I will cut it open." The tree shuddered. So did Liora. No one had ever threatened the sacred tree for her before. Meritha saw the danger in that too. How quickly pity becomes treason. Vaelor did not look away from Liora. "It is not pity." The courtyard seemed to narrow around the space between them. Liora did not know what to do with his answer, so she held to the only thing she trusted: the root, the heartbeats, the children. She stepped onto the first stair. The red roots warmed beneath her bare feet. Every fruit in the tree above her turned gold from within. Vaelor followed to the edge of the opening but did not descend. Liora Marrow. She looked back. His face held command, fear, and something more dangerous than either. Trust he had not yet earned, but was choosing to offer. "Bring me the truth," he said. Liora's fingers tightened around the living root at her wrist. "No," she answered. The court froze. Even Meritha stilled. Liora lifted her chin. "I will bring it to the children first." Then she descended into the red rain tree. Behind her, the staircase sealed with a sound like a heart closing. The staircase sealed above Liora with the sound of a heart closing. Darkness swallowed the courtyard, the court, the Dragon King, and the last sharp glimpse of Meritha's face. For one breath, Liora stood alone on the red root steps, with her hands shaking and her blood still warm around the place where the root chain had cut her wrists. Then the roots began to glow, not bright enough to comfort, just enough to show her the way down. The stairway curved beneath the red rain tree in a slow spiral, its walls woven from thick black roots veined with red-gold light. The air grew warmer with every step. It smelled of rain on stone, old blood, and something tender that made Liora's chest ache before she understood why. Milk. The faint, ghost-thin scent of a nursery. She nearly stopped. The root around her wrist tightened, not hurting, guiding. Below her, the children whispered. "Not all at once now. Onebuan, do not step on the white roots," a boy whispered. Liora looked down. Pale roots crossed the red stair like sleeping fingers. She stepped over them. A girl's voice breathed. "Do not touch the fruit that does not beat." Liora saw them then, small red fruits embedded in the walls, some pulsing softly, others dark and still. The still ones looked shrunken, emptied. "How many of you are here?" she whispered. The roots answered with silence first. Then, too many heartbeats. Liora pressed one hand to her mouth. The stair opened into a chamber beneath the courtyard. It was vast, far larger than the tree above should have allowed. Red roots arched overhead like ribs. The floor was packed, dark earth, damp and warm. Hundreds of root vessels hung from the ceiling, each shaped like a heart, each glowing faintly from within. Some beat with golden light. Some barely moved. Some hung silent and black. At the center of the chamber stood a throne root. Not a throne. A root, shaped like one. Its red-black tendrils stretched upward through the ceiling, toward the palace, toward Vaelor's throne, toward the dragon shadow that thinned whenever he came near the tree. And around the throne root, embedded in the earth, were tiny crowns. Not royal crowns meant for ruling. Infant circlets, burial rings, cradle charms, 100 little proofs that the kingdom had dressed murder in ceremony. Liora sank to her knees. The root around her wrist loosened, as if even the tree would not force her to stand before this. A fruit heart nearest her opened with a golden pulse. Inside its light, she saw a boy of perhaps 6 years, dark-haired, solemn, wearing a tunic embroidered with House Draven's mark, Prince Karen. His shape was not flesh, but not fully ghost. His small hand pressed against the inside of the fruit, as if it were glass. "You came," he said. Liora's voice broke. "I heard you. No one hears long. Why?" "Because the tree teaches them to call us rain." Another fruit pulsed. A little girl appeared, curls floating around her face like she was underwater. "Or harvest." Another, a toddler's voice. "Or blessing." Another. "Or throne root." Liora looked toward the central root, shaped like a throne. The children's hearts were not only feeding the tree, they were feeding the palace. The realization turned her cold. Above, Meritha had said 1 royal heart for 10 harvest years, but this was not one. This was a system, a hunger kept holy by repetition. Liora stood slowly. "Where is Arik?" The chamber dimmed. The fruit hearts nearest the throne root pulsed in fear. A small glow appeared at the base of the central root. There, half wrapped in red tendrils, was a heart fruit no larger than Liora's palm. Its golden light flickered weakly, and inside it, the child's shadow curled as if asleep. Little Arik, Vaelor's brother. The heart fruit was connected to the thickest root rising toward the palace. Liora stepped closer. Every mark on her wrist burned. "Why is he there?" Karen's voice trembled. "Because the king loved him." The answer made no sense, and all the sense in the world. A beloved child made a stronger offering. A royal grief, powerful enough to make the throne fertile. Liora's stomach twisted. She reached toward Arik's heart fruit. The chamber recoiled. Roots shot from the floor and wrapped around her ankles. Not attacking, warning. The little girl's voice cried, "Do not pull him free." Liora froze. Why? If one heart is torn out, the others tear with it. The throne root pulsed. Above them, faintly, through earth and wood and stone, Liora heard the courtyard roar. Vaelor had felt it. The tree was tied to his bloodline so tightly that even Liora's attempt to touch Arik had struck him. She pulled her hand back. The roots around her ankles released. A whisper moved from the deepest part of the chamber. Heart, root heir. Liora turned. At the far wall, behind a curtain of red roots, stood a figure made of bark, bone, and gold light. A woman, or the memory of one. Her hair fell in root strands over her shoulders. Her chest was hollow, and inside the hollow space burned a small golden seed. Liora could not breathe. The woman had her eyes. "You are late," the woman said. Liora's voice came out small. "Who are you?" "Marrow." The name struck her like a hand against the heart. Not a surname given by chance. A function. A wound. A bloodline. The woman stepped forward, and the roots parted around her. I was the first witness planted beside the first child. They thought a servant mother would die quietly if they buried her with the prince she tried to save. Liora's knees weakened. "You are my blood. I am what remains of it." The chamber filled with soft heartbeats. Liora looked at the hundreds of fruit hearts. "Can they be freed?" The woman's golden seed pulsed. Yes, hope opened too fast. Then the woman finished, but not by tearing the tree down. Above, the sealed stairway shook. Meritha's voice came faintly through the roots, chanting. The chamber darkened at once. Karen pressed his small hands to the inside of his fruit. "She is waking the harvest rite." The woman of roots turned toward the ceiling. "The priestess knows you reached the heart chamber. She will try to ripen the fruit early." "What does that mean?" The answer came from the children. "All of them. If we ripen, we burst." Liora went still. The red rain tree had burst fruit over traitors for generations. But those fruits were not judgment. They were children being spent. Above, the chanting grew louder. One of the black fruits on the wall began to swell. Then another. Then a beating fruit near Liora pulsed too fast, its golden light turning red. The girl inside it screamed. Liora grabbed the fruit with both hands, without thinking. Pain shot through her palms. The fruit fought her, swelling, straining toward rupture. The woman of roots shouted, "Do not hold it with fear. Hold it with name." Liora bent over the fruit, shaking. "What is her name?" The child sobbed inside the red light. "Illyra," whispered Karen. Liora pressed her forehead to the fruit. "Illyra, Illyra, Illyra." The fruit stopped swelling. Its light softened back to gold. Above, Meritha's chant faltered. The woman of roots stared at Liora with something like grief and pride. "That is why they feared us." Liora looked up. "Heart. Root does not command the dead," the woman said. "It remembers them correctly." The chamber shook again. This time, a root tore open near the ceiling, revealing a sliver of the courtyard above. Through it, Liora saw Vaelor on one knee beneath the tree. One hand pressed to his chest, his dragon shadow pinned by red roots, while Meritha raised her staff over him. The priestess's voice rang down through the chamber. "If the king will not feed the right with silence," Meritha said, "then his living heart will feed it instead." Aric's tiny heart-fruit pulsed in terror. Vaelor's dragon shadow thrashed. Liora rose from the chamber floor, gold light burning through her curse mark, the names of children gathering under her tongue like sparks. She looked at the woman of roots. "Open the stair." The woman's hollow chest glowed. "If you return now, the priestess will try to make you choose between the king and the children." Liora looked up at Vaelor, trapped beneath the tree that had fed on his family for generations. Then she looked at the heart fruits trembling around her. "No," she said. Her voice steadied. "I will make her answer to both." The roots beneath her feet split open, and the heart chamber lifted her back toward the red rain tree. The heart chamber lifted Liora through the roots, like blood returning to a wound. For one breath, she was underground, surrounded by hundreds of beating fruit hearts and children whispering their own names, so they would not burst. The next, the root stair tore open beneath the red rain tree, and the courtyard exploded back around her in fire, screams, and red-gold light. Vaelor was on one knee, at the base of the tree. Red roots had wrapped around his chest, arms, and throat, pinning him before the court, like a sacrifice dressed as a king. His dragon shadow writhed against the palace wall, wings stretched and pierced by root thorns. Every time the shadow fought, the fruit above him swelled brighter. Meritha stood before him with her root staff raised. Her crimson robes whipped in a wind that came from nowhere. Golden stains still marked her palms. The calm had left her face now. What remained was fiercer and more honest. Terror, wearing holiness as armor. "The throne must be fed," she cried to the court. "If the old hearts fail, a living heart must answer. The Dragon King's blood is the strongest root left." The nobles watched in horror, but some did not move. That was what Liora saw first. Not their fear, their hesitation. They were measuring whether a dying king was worth more than a fertile throne. The realization hardened something inside her. She stepped out of the opened root with the curse mark on her wrist blazing gold. "His heart is not yours to spend." Every fruit on the tree turned toward her, not with eyes, with pulse. Meritha's head snapped around. For the first time since Liora had known her, the high root priestess looked truly shaken. "You should have been sealed below." "I was heard below." Liora lifted her hand, and the root around her wrist unfurled like a living bracelet. Names burned beneath her skin, not written in letters, but beating in rhythm. Karen, Eira, Thorn, Maelis, Rovan, Saela, Arik. Hundreds more pressed behind them. Too many to speak at once without shattering her body. Vaelor raised his head with effort. His amber eyes found her through the roots. Pain had stripped his face of every royal defense, but not of will. "Liora," he rasped. "Do not let her use them." "I will not." Meritha laughed, sharp and breathless. "You think hearing names makes you powerful. You are a root-born vessel, a final witness planted to keep the children from being forgotten, not freed. Witness does not undo sacrifice." "No," Liora said. "But it can stop the next one." The tree shuddered. Meritha's staff struck the ground. The roots around Vaelor tightened. He gasped as red light pulled from his chest into the tree. The fruit above him swelled, one by one, growing full and heavy. The court began backing away as the branches bent under hundreds of ripening hearts. Liora felt panic surge from below. If the fruit burst, the children would be spent again. If Vaelor's heart fed the tree, the court would call it sacred necessity before the blood dried. She could not pull the roots from him by force. The heart chamber had warned her. Tear one root wrongly, and all the children tore with it. "Hold it with name." Liora stepped closer to the tree. Meritha's eyes narrowed. "Come then. Add your cursed little heart to his." Liora ignored her and looked up at the nearest swelling fruit. Inside it, a little girl's shadow curled in terror. "Elira," Liora said. The fruit trembled. "Elira, daughter of the Western Nursery, you liked rain on your hands. You were not famine. You were not blessing. You were not treason." The fruit's red glow softened to gold. The swelling stopped. The court fell silent. Liora turned to another fruit. "Karin, prince of the third spring. You hid sugared figs under your pillow and gave one to the stable boy." Another fruit steadied. "Thorn, you hated the gold cap they made you wear." Another. "Malus, you cried when the dragon eggs cracked because you thought the shells were hurt." Another. With every name, the fruit stopped ripening. With every memory, Vaelor's roots loosened. Meritha's face twisted. "Stop." Liora did not stop. She could not speak every name. Not yet. There were too many. But she did not need all of them at once. She needed the right to fail. She needed the tree to remember children, not offerings. "Little Eric," she said. Vaelor's breath caught. The tiny heart fruit near the throne root below answered through the tree. Liora felt him trembling under the roots. "Eric Draven," she whispered, voice shaking now. "Brother of Vaelor, born in famine winter, wrapped in black gold cloth. You were not too weak to live." The root around Vaelor's throat cracked. Meritha screamed and drove her staff into the ash circle. A circle of red light opened beneath Liora's feet. The court saw the memory at once. The chamber beneath the tree, priests in crimson, a newborn wrapped in House Draven cloth, young Meritha standing with a bowl in her hands, tears streaking her face while the older root priest pressed the thorn blade to the infant's chest. The bowl caught the first drop of gold blood. Young Meritha whispered, "He is only a child." The old priest answered, "Then he is clean enough." The vision shattered. Meritha stood exposed before the court, hands still stained with the fruit's golden light. Vaelor stared at her. "You knew." Her mouth trembled, then hardened. "I was 17. You held the bowl. I was commanded. And then you became the one who commanded others." The word struck. Meritha flinched, as if he had hit her. Liora saw it then. Not innocence, not excuse, but the shape of a woman who had survived her first horror by becoming its keeper. Meritha had not invented the tree's hunger. She had inherited it, fed it, protected it, and called that obedience sacred, because the alternative would mean admitting the first bowl had damned her. The red rain tree groaned. The roots around Vaelor loosened further. Meritha's eyes filled with fury. "You want confession? Here is confession. Yes, I held the bowl. Yes, I learned the right. Yes, I kept the harvest alive. Because when kings falter, temples must preserve the realm." Liora looked up at the beating fruit. No, you preserved the excuse. The heart-root mark on her wrist blazed. The tree bent lower. For the first time, its black branches did not bow only to Liora. They bowed toward the children's names. Vaelor tore one arm free from the weakening roots. Gold dragon fire flared under his skin, sick but rising. Meritha saw him move and lifted a curved thorn blade from inside her sleeve. Not toward him, toward herself. If the right needs blood, she whispered, mine will complete what his refuses. Liora felt the chamber below panic. A priestess's willing blood could ripen every fruit at once. She moved before thought could stop her. Vaelor did too. But Liora was closer. She caught Meritha's wrist, just as the thorn blade touched skin. Pain shot through Liora's palm. The blade cut them both. Liora's blood and Meritha's blood fell together onto the ash. The red rain tree screamed, not in rage, in recognition. The roots beneath the courtyard split open, and from below rose the woman of roots, Marrow, the first witness, her hollow chest burning with a golden seed. She looked at Meritha, then at Liora. The bowl was held, Marrow said. Now, let the hand answer. Meritha went pale. The golden stain on her palms began to move. It crawled up her wrists, like living light. Liora released her. Meritha staggered back, staring at her hands as every child name she had helped bury began writing itself across her skin. The court watched the high-root priestess become the record she had hidden, and from the roots around Vaelor, little Arik's voice whispered one final word. Brother, brother. The word came from the roots around Vaelor, like a breath returning after years underwater. The Dragon King froze. Red Root still wrapped his chest and one arm, but their hold had weakened. Gold dragon fire flickered beneath his skin, no longer being dragged upward so violently into the tree. His dragon shadow lifted its head from the palace wall, ragged but awake enough to hear. Arik, Vaelor whispered. The tiny heart fruit below answered through the tree, not with words this time, with a heartbeat. One small golden pulse moved from the roots beneath the courtyard into the cradle Vaelor still held. It struck his palm, then his wrist, then his chest. He bent over it, as if the sound had entered a place grief had sealed before he was old enough to understand it. Across from him, Meritha staggered backward, staring at her own hands. The golden stain no longer sat on her skin. It wrote. Names crawled up her palms and wrists in thin lines of light. Karen, Illyra, Thorn, Malis, Roven, Scylla, Eric. More followed, overlapping, burning, not deep enough to kill, too deep to hide. The children she had called offerings were becoming record inside the hands that once held the bowl. The court watched in horrified silence. For the first time, the high-root priestess looked less like a holy woman than a person trapped inside the ritual she had spent her life defending. This is not justice, she breathed. Marrow, the first witness, stood between the split roots, her body made of bark, bone, and gold seed light. No, she said. It is memory. Meritha's face twisted. Memory does not feed kingdoms. Neither should children. The words did not come from Liora. They came from Vaelor. He tore his remaining arm free from the loosened roots. The effort nearly dropped him to his knees again, but he stayed upright, one hand pressed to his chest, the other gripping the little root cradle. His dragon shadow rose higher behind him, still thin, still wounded, but no longer kneeling. Meritha turned on him. You speak like a man who has never watched famine hollow a mother's face. Vaelor's eyes burned. And you speak like a woman who decided a child's heart was easier to bury than a king's failure. That struck the courtyard hard. Several nobles looked away. Too many did not. Liora saw them calculating again. The red rain tree had fed harvests, It had fed the throne. It had kept famine from the gates. Truth might horrify them, but hunger had a way of making cruelty sound practical. Meritha saw it too. She lifted her marked hands toward the court. Look at me then. Look well. You enjoy the fruit of what you condemn. Your tables were full because the roots were fed. Your children lived because royal children died. If I am guilty, then every feast under House Draven is guilty with me. The court recoiled, but not enough. The tree trembled. The fruits above began to pulse faster. Liora felt danger surge from below. Meritha was no longer trying to hide the truth. She was trying to spread the guilt so wide that no one would dare act against it. If everyone benefited, no one would confess. If everyone was stained, the stained hands could stay in power. Liora stepped forward, the heart-root mark burning at her wrist. No, Meritha laughed, strained and bitter. No, no, Liora said. Shared benefit is not shared consent. The words moved through the courtyard. Servants heard them first. Stable boys, kitchen girls, ash sweepers, blood washers, old gardeners who had tended the tree without knowing what fed it. Their eyes lifted from the stone. They had eaten royal grain, too. They had survived harvests, too. But no one had asked them whether survival should cost a cradle. Liora looked at the balconies. The children did not choose. The servants did not choose. The mothers whose infants vanished did not choose. Do not hide murder inside a whole kingdom just because you fed the kingdom with it. The fruit above her slowed. On. The children were listening. Vaelor looked at Liora, and something like fierce recognition crossed his face. Not gratitude. Not yet. Something deeper and more dangerous. The beginning of trust, sharpened by shame. Meritha's marked hands curled. Fine. Let choice enter the right. The roots beneath the courtyard shifted. Marrow's golden seed flared. Do not! Too late. Meritha drove her thorn staff into the ground and spoke in the old root tongue. The white ash circle blazed red. Around the courtyard, every noble, guard, priest, and servant felt a root coil around one ankle. Panic broke across the balconies. Meritha's voice rose. If the court condemns the right, let the court feel what happens when the tree stops feeding the throne. The red rain tree inhaled. Every fruit went dark. The courtyard plunged into a silence so deep it felt like the world had lost its pulse. Then the palace began to wither. Not slowly. At once, flowers carved into stone cracked and shed dust. Gold banners dulled. The fountain beyond the courtyard coughed black water. Somewhere inside the palace, a dragon egg screamed from the royal hatchery. Vaelor turned sharply. His dragon shadow convulsed. Meritha smiled through pain. There. This is the kingdom without the hearts. Liora felt the children's terror below. The tree had stopped spending them, but the old system had tied too much life to their stolen heartbeats. Cutting the feeding all at once would harm the innocent above and the trapped below. Marrow looked at Liora. Names stopped the ripening. They cannot heal the hunger alone. What can? The first witness's golden seed pulsed. Return. Liora understood only partly. Then, Aric's tiny cradle in Vaelor's hand began to beat. The child's voice whispered, "Not feed, return." Vaelor looked at Liora. "Tell me what to do." Meritha laughed. A king asking a cursed girl how to save his throne. The roots have truly gone mad. Vaelor did not look away from Liora. "Not my throne." The words quieted even the tree. He took one step toward her, dragging weakened roots behind him. "Tell me how to save them. Them. Not crown. Not harvest. Not himself." The children heard it. The fruits lit faintly gold again. Liora looked down at the split ground, into the heart chamber below. She saw the central throne root. She saw the children's heart fruits woven into it. She saw the palace roots drinking upward, but beneath that, deeper than sacrifice, she saw something older, a root road, running from the red rain tree into the royal bloodline itself. The hearts had not only been taken, they had been used to grow power that could be returned. Liora lifted her bleeding wrist. The throne has to give back what it took. Vaelor's face went still. Meritha's smile vanished. What does that mean? He asked. The roots answered by wrapping around the little cradle in his hand and opening it fully. Inside, little Aric's heartbeat glowed like a small sun. Liora's throat tightened. It means the first return must be yours. Vaelor looked at his brother's heart. Then at the dying gold in the palace around them. Then at Liora. What must I return? The tree whispered through every fruit. Royal breath. Meritha staggered. No king survives that. Marrow's gaze stayed on Vaelor. No king has ever tried. No king has ever tried. Marrow's words settled over the courtyard like ash before rain. Vaelor stood beneath the red rain tree, with his brother's tiny root cradle in his hand, the palace withering around him, and the court trapped by roots at their ankles. Above, hundreds of red fruits glowed faintly with stolen heartbeats. Below, the heart chamber trembled. Between them stood Liora Marrow, bleeding from the wrist where priestess blood and witness blood had touched the same thorn blade. Royal breath. The tree had named the price. Meritha stared at Vaelor with something close to triumph and terror tangled together. Do you understand what it asks? Royal breath is not a word in a rite. It is the first breath of dragon fire in your blood. The breath that marks you king. Give it back, and your dragon may never rise fully again. Vaelor's dragon shadow lifted behind him, ragged wings spread against the palace wall. It was thin, wounded, but awake enough to hear its own possible ending. The nobles stirred, some with fear, some with hope. Liora saw that too and hated them for it. They were already calculating what a weakened king might mean. Vaelor saw it as well. His mouth tightened. Look how quickly grief becomes politics. Meritha's voice sharpened. Because politics keeps people alive when kings mistake guilt for virtue. No, Liora said. Politics made the children disappear quietly. The red rain tree pulsed. The root around her wrist warmed, and the names under her skin pressed forward. She felt them not as power, but as weight. Little Aric, Kerin, Elira, Thorn, Malis. Hundreds of heartbeats stolen to make harvests, fertility, throne strength, dragon eggs, royal feasts, and temple power look like blessing. Vaelor turned toward Liora. If I give royal breath, what happens to them? She listened. The roots answered in fragments. The first return would loosen the throne, root from the children's hearts. It would not free all of them. Not yet. The system had grown too deep for one act, even one king's, but it would stop the tree from feeding on royal children as law. It would make every hidden heart speak. It would force the throne to live by what it could earn, not what it buried. It opens the return, Liora said. It does not finish it. Vaelor no de duanse. Meritha laughed, bitter and shaking. A beautiful way to say you may destroy yourself and still not save them. Vaelor looked at his brother's cradle. The golden heartbeat inside flickered. No, he said quietly. It means I cannot buy absolution with one grand wound. For the first time, Marrow smiled. It was sad, proud. Liora felt the truth of it. A king giving one breath would not undo generations. A witness naming one child would not empty the roots. But a beginning was still a wound in the lie. Vaelor stepped toward the split ash circle. The roots around his legs tried to hold him, not in attack now, but in old hunger. They knew his blood. They had drunk near it for years. His dragon shadow followed, head low, as if it understood it was being asked to return something taken before it was born. Liora moved beside him. Meretha's eyes narrowed. "Do not stand near him, cursed girl. If royal breath leaves him through your mark, the court will call you the thief." "They already called me traitor," Liora said. "That was before you had something worth stealing." The warning hit, because it was true. A powerless girl was easy to condemn. A necessary girl was easy to use. Vaelor looked at Liora then. "You do not have to carry this." The sentence startled her. She had expected command, or need, or the desperate urgency of a man about to lose part of himself, not refusal to make her the vessel of his sacrifice. Liora swallowed. "I am not carrying it for you." His eyes held hers. "I am opening the road," she said. "You must return it yourself." The red rain tree bent lower. Marrow lifted one bark-bone hand and touched the ground. The roots between Vaelor and the tree's trunk pulled apart, revealing a hollow in the black bark, shaped like a child's open mouth. No teeth, no tongue. Only red gold light pulsing deep inside. Aric's cradle beat faster. Vaelor approached the hollow. Every noble in the courtyard leaned forward. Meretha's marked hands trembled at her sides, every buried name still writing itself across her skin. "Your Majesty," she said. And this time there was no ceremony left, only desperate warning. "If you do this, the temple cannot guarantee the harvest." Vaelor did not look back. "Then the temple will learn to grow something without graves." The words moved through the servants first. A breath, a shiver, a dangerous beginning. Vaelor placed Aric's tiny root cradle into the hollow of the tree. The bark closed gently around it. Then the tree opened again, and from the hollow rose a thin red root, no thicker than a ribbon. It reached toward Vaelor's mouth. Leora's heart slammed against her ribs. Royal breath. Vaelor did not flinch, but his dragon shadow did. It recoiled, wings tearing against the roots, pinning its edges. For one terrible moment, Liora thought the dragon might refuse him, not from disloyalty, but from survival. Every living thing fought the hand that reached for its breath. Vaelor closed his eyes. "Aric," he whispered. "I did not know." The cradle inside the tree pulsed. The child's voice answered, faint and trembling. "I know." That broke something in the king's face, only for a breath. Then he leaned toward the red root and exhaled. Gold dragon fire left his mouth in a thin stream, not flame, breath. It entered the red root and turned white gold as it traveled into the tree. The entire courtyard shook, every fruit lit from within. The palace stopped withering for one suspended heartbeat. Then the root screamed. Vaelor staggered, but did not pull away. More breath left him, and his dragon shadow thinned until Liora could see the stone through its wings. "Enough," Liora whispered. The tree did not stop. Meretha's eyes widened. "It will take all of it," she breathed. "The right does not know restraint." Leora's blood went cold. Of course it did not. A system built on sacrificed children would not understand enough. Vaelor's knees buckled. Liora grabbed the root around her own wrist and pressed her glowing heart-root mark against the tree's trunk. "No," she said. The tree fought her. The children cried out below. Marrow's voice rose through the roots. "Name the return." Liora understood. She pressed her forehead to the bark and spoke with every heartbeat burning beneath her skin. "Aric Draven," she said. "This breath is returned to open the road, not to feed the hunger." The red root loosened from Vaelor's mouth. He collapsed to one knee, gasping. Liora did not stop. Heron, Illyra, Thorn, Malus, Roven, Sailor, and every child planted beneath this tree witnessed this return. No more royal breath without choice. No more heart without name. No more harvest bought by hidden children. The fruits above burst into gold light. Not blood, light. Each fruit opened just enough to release a single heartbeat into the air. Hundreds of tiny golden pulses floated down around the courtyard like slow rain. They touched the stone, the roots, the servants, the nobles, the king. Where they landed, memories opened. Mothers crying outside sealed nursery doors, priests carrying bowls under crimson cloth, kings looking away. Harvest festivals held 3 months after infant funerals. The court saw everything, not as accusation shouted by a cursed girl, as memory returned by the children themselves. Meritha fell to her knees. The names on her hands burned brighter, crawling up her arms beneath her sleeves. Vaelor looked up from the roots, pale and shaken, his dragon shadow nearly transparent but still alive. Above him, little Aric's voice whispered through the tree. Brother returned breath. The root cradle opened. Inside, the golden heartbeat no longer flickered. It steadied, and beneath the courtyard, the first child heart loosened from the throne root. The first child heart loosened from the throne root. The courtyard felt it before anyone understood what had happened. The palace gave a low groan, not of collapse, but of something long clenched beginning to release. Red gold light traveled beneath the courtyard stones in thin veins, running from the red rain tree toward the black throne and back again. The tiny cradle inside the tree pulsed once with little Aric's steadier heartbeat, and Vaelor bowed over it. One hand braced against the root, his breathing torn but alive. Liora stood beside him with her forehead still pressed to the bark. Her heart-root mark burned at her wrist, but the pain no longer felt like punishment. It felt like too many names trying to pass through too narrow a door. Above them, the red fruit hung open in hundreds of small glowing mouths. No blood fell, only light. Each golden pulse that touched the court opened another memory. A queen turning her face to the wall while a priest carried away her newborn. A king signing a harvest decree with trembling fingers. A nursemaid silenced with temple ash on her tongue. A root priestess, younger than Meritha, weeping into a bowl, and being told mercy was a luxury kingdoms could not afford. Some nobles fell to their knees. Some wept. Some looked furious, as if the worst thing the dead could do was make survival complicated. Meritha knelt in the ash, both hands clutched against her chest. The names had crawled past her wrists now, bright beneath the crimson sleeves. They moved up her arms like living vines. Every child she had hidden becoming a line no robe could cover. "This will starve the eastern fields," she whispered. No one answered, so she lifted her head and made them hear. "You think gold light feeds villages? You think names fill granaries? The first heart has loosened, yes, beautiful, holy, and if the throne root weakens too fast, the harvest wards fail before winter. Children above ground will die for children below ground, already dead." The courtyard recoiled from the cruelty of it, but not from its fear. Liora felt that fear move through the court like cold water. Meritha was not trying to deny the horror anymore. She was trying to make horror feel necessary. Vaelor lifted his head. His face had gone pale from returning royal breath, and the dragon shadow behind him was nearly transparent, but when he spoke, his voice still carried. "Then we do not replace one sacrifice with another." Meritha laughed, raw and bitter. "Spoken like a king who just gave one breath and thinks he understands hunger." Vaelor tried to stand. His knees failed. Liora caught his arm before he hit the stone. The court saw it. The cursed woman, holding the Dragon King upright, beneath the tree that had fed on his family. Vaelor's body was hot, with spent dragon fire, his breath uneven. He looked at her hand on his arm, then at her face, and did not pull away. For a heartbeat, Liora forgot the court. She saw only the man, wounded by a truth older than him, still refusing to let pain become permission. Then Meritha's voice cut between them, touching, but useless. The first return has weakened the root. The throne must be stabilized before the palace breaks its harvest bond. Liora looked up sharply. Stabilized how? The priestess's eyes moved to the open fruits. The children fell silent. Liora's blood chilled. Meritha stood slowly, the names burning beneath her skin. One willing heart can bind the loosened root without bursting the others. Vaelor's gaze hardened. No, you do not even know what I mean. I know enough. Meritha smiled, and there was nothing holy left in it. Do you? Because I am not asking for a child. Her gaze turned to Liora. The courtyard seemed to shrink. A heart-root heir was planted as witness beside the first sacrifice, Meritha said. Witness blood can hold the root without killing the buried hearts. That was always its purpose. Not to free them, to keep them remembered just enough that the tree remained obedient. Marrow's figure flickered beside the split root, her hollow chest glowing dimly. Liora looked at her. The first witness did not deny it. Leora's throat tightened. You were planted to stabilize the tree. Marrow's eyes filled with old grief. I was buried with a child I tried to save. The priests learned later what my blood could do. Meritha spread her marked hands. There is your answer. Let Liora Marrow take the loosened root into herself. The children remain intact. The harvest wards survive. The king keeps what breath remains. The court receives justice wrapped in mercy. Vaelor's hand closed around Leora's wrist. Not hard, reflexive, protective before permission could shape it. He released her almost immediately, as if he hated that fear had made him grasp. No, he said. Meritha tilted her head. You would doom your fields to spare one cursed girl? Liora heard the trap. One cursed girl. The court had called her that for years. It was easy math. One unwanted life weighed against harvest, throne, dragon, and children not yet born. She looked at the open fruits. The child hearts trembled. Not asking. Never asking. That was what broke her most. They had already been used by too many adults who called their fear necessity. They would not demand the same from her. Vaelor turned to the court. No more bodies will be made into roots. Meritha's voice sharpened. Then what is your plan, Majesty? Another breath? You barely survived the first. Will you feed the next root with your lungs, your dragon, your throne, your life? Vaelor answered too slowly, because he did not know. Liora felt the whole courtyard realize it. The king had chosen truth, but truth had opened a wound larger than one vow could close. The fruit above began to pulse faster again, not ripening, but afraid. The loosened heart below needed a place to rest before the throne root tore it back. Liora closed her eyes. Names moved inside her. Arik, Tarin, Heir, Marrow. Return, the roots whispered. Not sacrifice. Return. Liora opened her eyes. Meritha is wrong, she said. The priestess smiled faintly. Am I? Yes. Liora looked at Vaelor, then at the court, then at the servants gathered near the lower archways. One body cannot hold what a whole kingdom took. The red rain tree stilled. The harvest was fed by hidden children because kings, priests, nobles, and temples agreed to let the cost disappear. If the root must be stabilized, then the return must be carried by everyone who benefited from the lie. Meritha's face went blank. Vaelor looked at Liora, as if seeing the road a moment before it opened. The roots at every ankle tightened. Nobles cried out. Servants stiffened. Priests recoiled. Liora lifted her bleeding wrist. Not blood. Not hearts. Names. The tree answered with a low pulse. The court will speak them, she said. Every house that ate harvest bread from the red rain tree will carry a name until that child's heart is safely loosened. No one dies. No one is planted. But no one gets to be innocent by silence, Meritha whispered. Impossible. Marrow's golden seed flared. No. Forgotten. Vaelor stood with effort. One hand still braced on Liora's shoulder, only after she allowed it with a slight nod. He faced the court. You heard the Heart-Root heir, he said. Every noble house will take a name. Every temple keeper will take a name. My house will take the first. The root cradle opened. Little Aric's heartbeat rose in a small sphere of gold light and floated toward Vaelor. The king did not flinch. It touched his chest and sank beneath his armor. He gasped once, not from pain, from memory. Tears filled his eyes before he could hide them. I carry Aric, he said. The throne root shuddered. The first child heart loosened fully, and above them, one red fruit turned clear as glass, empty at last. One red fruit turned clear as glass, empty at last. The courtyard did not cheer. No one knew how to cheer for a child finally released from a tree that had fed a kingdom. The clear fruit hung among the red ones like a small, quiet moon, hollow but no longer hungry. Beneath the stone, little Aric's heart had loosened from the throne root and settled inside Vaelor's chest, not as a wound, not as a sacrifice, but as memory carried openly. The Dragon King stood with one hand pressed over his armor, breathing as if the breath he had returned had made room for something gentler and more terrible. I carry Aric, he said again. This time, his voice did not break. The tree answered with one slow pulse. Liora felt the change travel through the roots. Aric's heart was not trapped anymore. It had not vanished either. It had become a name held by the living, a heartbeat remembered correctly. A child no longer disguised as harvest. The court understood slowly, too slowly. A noblewoman near the lower balcony whispered, "If every house takes a name." Her husband seized her wrist. "Do not speak." Liora turned toward them. The root at the man's ankle tightened. He went pale. Vaelor saw it. "Let her speak." The noblewoman swallowed, eyes wet with fear. "If every house takes a name, then every house must admit the fruit fed us." "Yes," Liora said. "And if we refuse?" Before Liora could answer, the red rain tree did. A red fruit above the noblewoman's head swelled once, not to burst, but to reveal a golden child shadow inside. A little boy pressed his hand to the fruit's inner skin. The noblewoman made a small broken sound. The boy whispered, "I warmed your winter bread." Her face collapsed. She reached up as if she could touch him from below. "What is his name?" Liora closed her eyes. The root around her wrist sent the answer through her blood. "Rovan." The noblewoman pressed both hands to her chest. "I carry Rovan." The fruit above her turned clear. The courtyard shuddered. A second child heart loosened beneath the roots. Meritha staggered as the names on her arms burned brighter. "Stop. You do not know what this will do." Liora looked at her. "No, you do." That silenced her. Because Meritha did know. She had known from the beginning that names could loosen what blood had bound. That was why the temple had turned children into blessings, harvests, treason fruit, royal necessity, anything but themselves. A young lord at the eastern stairs lifted his chin. "And what if I do not carry a name for a dead child I never chose to harm?" The servants behind him went still. Vaelor's eyes hardened. But Liora raised one hand before he could speak. "You do not carry guilt for a blade you did not hold," she said. "You carry the truth of what kept your house alive. There is a difference." The young lord scoffed, but the sound trembled. "And if I refuse that difference?" The root at his ankle climbed to his knee, not wounding, holding. Above him, a fruit pulsed red gold. A girl's voice whispered, I kept your father's fields green. The Lord paled. His mother, old and silver-haired, stepped from behind him with tears already falling. Name her. Liora listened. Saela. The old woman bowed her head. I carry Saela. The fruit cleared. Another heart loosened. Then a servant stepped forward. Not noble, not priest. A kitchen boy with flour still on his sleeve and terror in his eyes. Did servants eat the harvest too? Leora's throat tightened. Yes. Then do we carry names? Meritha laughed weakly. Look at that. The curse spreads even to those who had no power. No, Liora said. Power took from the children. Hunger received what power gave. That is not the same wound. The boy looked at the tree. But I still ate. Vaelor stepped down from the roots, pale but steady. Then carry as witness, not as sentence. The boy nodded shakily. I can do that. A small fruit near the lower branch glowed. Melis, Liora said. The boy pressed his flour-dusted hand to his chest. I carry Melis. The fruit cleared. The tree exhaled. One by one. The courtyard changed. Not cleanly. Not peacefully. Some nobles resisted until roots held them still, and the children's voices spoke what their houses had gained. Some priests wept before names reached them. Some servants stepped forward willingly, not because they owed the temple obedience, but because the children had been hidden under the same stones they cleaned. Guards took names. Gardeners took names. A wet nurse, who had lost 3 infants to temple fever, fell to her knees when a fruit whispered one of their voices back. Vaelor carried Arik. The old noblewoman carried Saela. The kitchen boy carried Melis. A guard carried Thorn. A priest who had once swept the root chamber as a child carried Kerin and sobbed so hard he could barely speak the name. With every name accepted, a fruit turned clear. With every clear fruit, a heart loosened below. The throne root weakened, but it did not collapse. The harvest bond shifted, no longer drinking from hidden children, but from living witness spread across the kingdom that had benefited from their erasure. Liora felt the weight lessen beneath her skin. For the first time since the tree had called her Heart-Root heir, the names did not press like a flood behind her tongue. They had somewhere to go. Meritha watched it happen with horror deepening into something worse. Loss. The right was not failing. It was becoming something she could not control. She turned suddenly toward the red rain tree and lifted the thorn blade again. Vaelor moved, but Liora was closer to the root. Meritha did not strike herself this time. She struck the tree. The thorn blade sank into the black bark. Every clear fruit flickered. The courtyard screamed. Marrow's figure flashed gold and nearly vanished. Liora felt the pain through her own wrist, as if the blade had entered her bone. Meritha twisted the knife. If the tree will not obey the old rite, it will die before it unseats the temple. Vaelor's dragon shadow surged, but Arik's heartbeat in his chest faltered when he moved too fast. Liora shouted, "Stop!" Meritha looked at her with tears running down her face. I gave my whole life to this tree. No, Liora said, walking toward her through the shaking roots. You gave other lives to it, and called the cost yours. The words struck Meritha harder than any blade. Her hand trembled on the knife. Liora reached the trunk. The tree's blood-red gold sap ran over the bark around the thorn blade. Every fruit beat in pain. Every name-carrier in the courtyard clutched their chest as the children's memories shook inside them. Liora placed both hands around the blade. Vaelor's voice cut through the chaos. Liora, do not take the wound alone. She looked back at him. His face held fear, not of her, for here. That almost made her falter. Then Arik's tiny voice whispered from his chest. Together, Liora understood. She turned to the courtyard. Every name you carry, speak it. For one breath, no one moved. Then Vaelor spoke first. Arik. The noblewoman followed. Saela, the kitchen boy, Malus, the guard, Thorn, the priest, Carin. More voices rose, more names, hundreds, trembling at first, then stronger. The courtyard became a river of children remembered aloud. Liora gripped the thorn blade. This time, when she pulled, she did not pull alone. The names pulled with her. The blade came free. Red gold sap flooded over her hands. Meritha collapsed at the base of the tree. The red rain tree gave one enormous pulse, and every remaining fruit burst open, not with blood, but with golden light. The children's shadows rose beneath the roots, hundreds of them, small hands, small faces, small crowns, small bare feet, standing on air. They did not look at Meritha first. They looked at Liora, then at Vaelor, then at the court that had finally spoken their names, and together they whispered, "Now ask who planted the first. Now ask who planted the first." The children's whisper moved through the courtyard with the force of a buried storm. Every golden shadow stood beneath the red rain tree, small and bright, no longer hidden inside fruit, no longer folded beneath roots as nameless harvest. They hovered above the cracked stone in a trembling circle around Liora Marrow and Dragon King Vaelor Draven, hundreds of children whose stolen heartbeats had fed a throne, filled granaries, strengthened dragon eggs, and made murder look like blessing. Meritha lay at the base of the tree, one hand pressed against the black bark where the thorn blade had been pulled free. The names on her arms burned so bright they showed through her crimson sleeves. She looked older now, not merely aged, but hollowed by the collapse of every holy excuse that had kept her standing. Vaelor held one hand over his chest where Aric's memory heart rested. His dragon shadow rose behind him, thin but steadier, its ragged wings no longer pinned. It lowered its great head toward the child shadows, not as ruler, not as beast, but as witness. Vaelor's voice was rough. Who planted the first? No one answered, not at first. The red rain tree shuddered. Marrow, the first witness, stood beside the split root with her hollow chest glowing around the golden seed. Her face had grown clearer since the children's names were spoken. Less bark, more woman, more grief. She looked at the palace, not at Meritha, not at the temple guards, at the black throne visible beyond the courtyard arch. Liora felt dread gather beneath her ribs. The children whispered again. Ask the throne. The courtyard turned toward Vaelor. Some nobles looked relieved, as if the question had moved away from them. Others looked terrified, because they understood exactly what it meant. The first planting had not been a desperate act by a famine priest. It had not been a temple rite born in isolation. A throne did not feed for generations without learning the taste. Vaelor's jaw tightened. Bring the throne record. Meritha laughed from the ground. Weakly, bitterly. There is no throne record for the first planting. Vaelor looked at her. Because it was destroyed? No. Her eyes lifted to his, wet and ruined. Because the first planting was not recorded as sacrifice. It was recorded as coronation. The courtyard went still. The red rain tree groaned, and the black roots pulled apart near the throne path. From beneath the stone rose an old slab of red-veined marble, cracked down the center and wrapped in hair-thin roots. On it lay a crown, not a king's crown, but a coronation circlet made from black dragon bone and dried root. It was small enough to fit a child. Vaelor stared at it. Marrow's voice was soft. The first child was not planted to save the kingdom after famine. The famine became the story later. Liora's throat tightened. Then why? The first witness looked at her. To crown the first dragon king who had no dragon. A sound moved through the court, like breath sucked from a wound. Vaelor went pale. His dragon shadow flickered. Meritha closed her eyes. Marrow stepped toward the red-veined slab. Before House Draven claimed the throne, the dragon answered children of the root line. Not kings, not priests. Children born with heart. Fire. The first Draven king could not wake a dragon. So, the temple planted the child who could. The child shadows bowed their heads. Liora could barely speak. Who was the child? Marrow's golden seed pulsed. My son. The words struck the courtyard harder than thunder. Leora's knees weakened. Marrow's gaze held hers. He was called Ray. He was 5. He had a laugh that made birds answer. The dragon came to him when he slept beside the roots. The first Draven king took the dragon, took the throne, and planted the boy's heart beneath the tree so the borrowed fire would keep answering his blood. Vaelor looked as though the ground had vanished beneath him. His house had not merely fed on sacrifice. It had been born from theft. Meritha pushed herself upright with shaking arms. Every throne begins in violence. Do not pretend this one is special. Vaelor turned toward her slowly. You knew. I learned when I became priestess, and you kept it. I inherited a kingdom already rooted in the crime. Liora stepped forward. And you chose to keep watering it. Meritha's eyes flashed, but no answer came. The small coronation circlet on the slab cracked open. Inside it lay a single red seed, dry and dark. Marrow looked at Liora, the first heart seed. If it remains buried, the throne will always remember the old hunger. The children can be named, carried, and loosened, but the right will grow back. Vaelor's voice was low. How is it ended? Marrow did not look at him. She looked at Liora. A chill passed through the roots. No, Vaelor said immediately. Liora looked at him. He had understood before she had. Marrow's expression filled with sorrow. Heart. Root blood must wake the first seed, not to feed it, to return it to the child it was stolen from. Vaelor stepped between Liora and the slab. No. The court froze at the sound in his voice. Not command. Fear. Meritha smiled faintly from the ground. There it is. Even the righteous king finds a body he cannot bear to risk. Vaelor's amber eyes burned. I will not let another woman be placed under this tree for my house. Liora's chest tightened. No one had ever said my house like an accusation against himself before. She moved beside him, not behind him. You do not get to choose for me either. Pain flashed across his face. I know. The answer stopped her for a breath. He did know. That was what made this different from all the old rites. He could fear for her, and still not claim her decision. He could stand close without becoming another chain. Liora looked at Marrow. What happens if I wake it? The first child speaks. The throne hears. The old hunger loses its root. And what happens to me? Marrow's golden seed dimmed. You may have to carry the first heartbeat until it finds its name, Meritha whispered. And if the name refuses to leave her, she becomes the new tree. Vaelor's dragon shadow snarled. The children's shadows flickered in fear. Liora looked at the clear fruits above them, at the names carried in living chests, at Vaelor, pale from returned breath, at Meritha, marked by the children she had hidden, at Marrow, the first witness buried with the son she tried to save. Then she looked at the red seed. All her life, they had called her root-touched, like it meant infection. Maybe it had always meant she could feel where things had been buried and still reach them. I will not become another tree, she said. Marrow's eyes softened. Then, do not hold him as sacrifice. Hold him as name. Liora stepped to the slab. Vaelor moved with her, but not in front this time. Beside, the difference mattered. She placed her bleeding wrist over the cracked coronation circlet. The heart-root mark opened in gold light, and the dry red seed rose slowly from the broken crown. It hovered between her and the tree, small, dark, impossible heavy, with the beginning of every hidden murder. Liora cupped it in her hands. The courtyard vanished. She stood in an older grove under a younger sky. A little boy with dark curls slept beside the roots with one hand on a dragon hatchling's nose. Marrow, alive and young, laughed softly nearby. Then, men came in black dragon bone, a crown, a blode, a root opening like a mouth. The boy woke only once. Mother? The vision shattered. Liora collapsed to one knee in the courtyard, clutching the seed to her chest. Vaelor caught her before she struck the stone. This time, she let him. The seed beat once. Then a little boy's voice whispered from inside her hands. My name was Liora Marrow. The red rain tree split from root to crown in gold light, and every Draven banner in the courtyard fell. Every Draven banner in the courtyard fell. Black gold cloth dropped from the balconies like dead wings, striking the stone one by one while the red rain tree split open in a column of gold light. Nobles cried out and stumbled back. Priests covered their faces. Servants stood frozen beneath the falling banners, watching the symbol of a throne that had fed on buried children collapse without a blade touching it. Liora Marrow knelt at the base of the tree, with the first heartseed cupped in her hands. Vaelor held her upright, one arm around her shoulders, careful even in panic not to crush her against him. His dragon shadow rose behind him, thin but burning brighter than before, its ragged wings opening toward the golden split in the tree. Inside Liora's hands, the seed beat again. My name was Liora Marrow, the boy whispered. The first witness, Marrow, staggered as if the name had struck through what remained of her heart. Her bark-bone body flickered, and for one breath she looked almost living, a mother hearing her child answer after generations underground. Ray, she said. The golden seed opened, not like fruit, like an eye waking. A small boy's shadow rose from Liora's hands, dark curls brightened by root light, one hand lifted as if still reaching for the dragon hatchling stolen from his sleep. He looked first at Marrow, then at the red rain tree, then at Vaelor. The courtyard held its breath. Vaelor lowered his head. My house took your dragon, he said, voice rough. My house took your heart. My house built its crown on your burial. The boy watched him silently. Vaelor removed the black circlet from his brow and placed it on the cracked stone between them. I will not wear what began with you hidden beneath it. A sound moved through the court shock. Fear, protest, but no one dared speak louder than the tree. Ray looked at the circlet, then at Liora. Do I have to stay? He asked. The question broke something in her. Liora shook her head, tears burning hot down her face. No, not if you do not choose to. The red rain tree trembled from root to crown. Meritha crawled forward, the children's names still burning across her arms. If he leaves the first seed, the old harvest bond dies. Vaelor turned toward her. Then let it die. The eastern fields will be fed by living hands, not buried hearts. The throne will stand only if it can stand without children beneath it. Meritha stared at him, and for the first time, she had no sacred answer left. The names on her arms flared. Every child's shadow in the courtyard turned toward her, not with cruelty, with memory. Marrow stepped beside Ray and placed one root-woven hand over his shoulder. The hand that kept the bowl must carry the record. The golden names burned brighter on Meritha's skin, sealing into her flesh like living script. Vaelor's voice became law. High Root Priestess Meritha, you will not be executed. You will stand before every village that ate from this tree and speak the names of the children buried beneath it. You will open the temple records. You will mark every harvest bought with hidden hearts. If one name is withheld, the roots will write it deeper. Meritha bowed her head, not in repentance, not yet, but in defeat. The red rain tree gave one final pulse. Every clear fruit opened. The child shadows rose higher, each turning toward the person who carried their name. Some touched a noble's chest. Some touched a servant's hand. Some touched a priest's bowed head. Then, one by one, they dissolved into golden sparks that sank into the earth, not buried now, but returned. Ray remained last. He looked at Liora. "Will you remember me?" She pressed one hand to the heart-root mark on her wrist. "Yes, not as Harvest, never. Not as Throne, never. As Ray?" Leora's voice broke. "As Ray Marrow." The boy smiled. Then he turned to his mother. Marrow opened her arms. When Ray stepped into them, the first witness burst into gold light. The hollow in her chest filled. The seed disappeared. Mother and child rose together through the split red rain tree, and the black bark turned pale where their light touched it. For the first time in generations, leaves began to grow. Not red, green. The courtyard watched in silence as the red rain tree changed from a monument of judgment into something no one knew how to name. Vaelor helped Liora stand. She was shaking, exhausted, blood dried at her wrists, the heart-root mark still glowing softly beneath her skin. The court no longer looked at her as omen blood or root-touched or cursed woman. That almost frightened her more. Reverence could become another cage, if allowed to harden. Vaelor seemed to understand. He stepped back before the court could mistake his nearness for ownership. "Liora Marrow is not property of the throne, the temple, or this tree," he said. "She is witnessed by blood and choice. No right will command her. No priest will bind her. No crown will use her name without her consent." Liora looked at him then. The Dragon King stood crownless beneath his fallen banners, pale from the royal breath he had returned. His dragon shadow wounded, but alive behind him. He did not look like a savior. He looked like a man who had inherited a grave and chosen not to sit on it. That mattered. More than softness. More than promises. Later, when dawn touched the courtyard, the first green leaves opened on the tree. The fruits were gone. The white ash circle had cracked apart. Beneath it, small golden names glowed in the stone. Each one spoken, each one carried. Vaelor found Liora standing near the lowest root. He stopped at a careful distance. "You may leave the palace," he said. She looked at him. "And if I stay until every name is recorded, then I will ask what you need, not what the throne needs? No, not what your dragon needs?" His amber eyes held hers. "No." The answer settled slowly into her. "A road, not a chain." Liora looked up at the new green leaves moving in the morning wind. "Then, I will stay until the children are named. After that, I choose again." Vaelor bowed his head. "After that, you choose again." For the first time, the red rain tree did not whisper from beneath the roots. It breathed, and when Liora Marrow placed her palm against its pale new bark, no child cried underground.